Use headphones for a better experience.
Sometimes, it's not the strangers you need to fear, it's the people closest to you. I thought I knew my neighbors, but I couldn't have been more wrong. What happened in the house next door changed my life forever and taught me a terrifying lesson about trust and ignorance. I moved into my new house 6 months ago. It was in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone smiled, waved, and kept their lawns pristine. My house shared a driveway with the one next door, a slightly older home that had been vacant for years, or so I thought. My first week there, I met a few neighbors. They mentioned the previous occupant of the house next door, an elderly woman named Mrs. Callahan, had passed away, and the property had been tied up in legal disputes ever since. No one had lived there in years, or so they believed. It started with little things. At night, I'd sometimes see a faint light flicker through the windows of Mrs. Callahan's house. I figured it was probably kids sneaking in, or maybe some leftover wiring acting up. Then I began hearing noises, soft creaks and thuds coming from the house, especially late at night. My bedroom faced one of its windows, and a few times I thought I saw movement behind the curtains. When I mentioned this to a neighbor, they brushed it off. "It's just an old house settling," they said. One rainy night, I was working late on my computer when I heard a sound outside, like a low scraping. I looked out the window and saw a figure standing in the driveway, partially obscured by the rain. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then the figure moved, stepping closer to my house. My heart raced as I locked the doors and turned off the lights, hoping whoever it was would go away. The next morning, there was no sign of anyone, but something about it didn't sit right with me. A few days later, I noticed something odd. My trash cans, which I always kept by my garage, were missing. I found them later behind Mrs. Callahan's house, their contents scattered. I decided to investigate. As I walked closer, I noticed the back door of the house was slightly ajar. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The air was stale, and the house was eerily silent. Dust covered most surfaces, but there were signs of recent activity. Footprints in the dirt, an empty food wrapper on the counter, and a faint smell of something rotten. I left in a hurry, my skin crawling. I reported what I saw to the police, but they were dismissive. "Probably just squatters," the officer said. "We'll send someone to check it out." They came, looked around, and left. No signs of anyone living there, they told me. But I knew better. The real horror began a week later. I was trimming the bushes along the property line when I noticed something strange. A rope dangling from Mrs. Callahan's attic window. I couldn't help my curiosity. I climbed up the fence for a better look and saw a face staring back at me. It was pale, gaunt, and hollow-eyed, a man who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. He disappeared the moment our eyes met. Terrified, I called the police again. This time, they did a more thorough search. What they found shocked the entire neighborhood. The man in the attic was Mrs. Callahan's son. He'd been declared missing over a decade ago, assumed to have left the country. Instead, he'd been living in the house undetected since her death. He had set up a makeshift living space in the attic, surviving off stolen food and water from neighboring homes. The noises, the lights, the figure in the rain, it had all been him. The man was taken into custody, but the discovery left the neighborhood shaken. How could someone live right under our noses for so long without anyone noticing? For weeks, I couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought of how close I'd been to danger. Every creak in my house felt like a reminder that sometimes the real threats aren't strangers. They're the people hiding in plain sight. This experience taught me a sobering lesson. We often ignore the things that seem out of place because it's easier to explain them away. In a world where we're increasingly disconnected from our surroundings, it's easy to miss the signs that something is wrong. Pay attention to your instincts and never dismiss what feels off. Because sometimes The scariest monsters aren't in the dark, they're in the house next door.
Don't miss out on the scares. Go subscribe to the channel for terrifying stories, legend breakdowns, and more. Bell turn on notifications and experience horror like never before.